The email arrived at 4:17 p.m. on a Friday, which is the corporate coward's favorite time slot. It allows the sender to scurry out to their Tesla and hit the 405 freeway before the recipient has time to process the rage. Subject: compensation review/Q3 adjustment. I didn't open it immediately. I let it sit there, bold and unread, pulsing like a migraine in the center of my Outlook monitor. I took a sip of my lukewarm green tea. I looked around the open plan office of Zephyr Stream, a mid-sized SAW disruptor in Silicon Valley that smelled perpetually of roasted coffee beans and desperation. To my left, the sales team was playing frantic ping-pong, high-fiving over a deal I knew for a fact they had structured incorrectly. To my right, the marketing interns were filming a TikTok dance about hustle culture. I am Mara. I am 42 years old. I am the senior contracts and IP analyst. That means I'm the person who reads the 400-page documents that the bros in sales sign without looking. I'm the one who makes sure we don't accidentally sell the rights to our source code to a shell company in the Caymans. I am the invisible guardrail on a highway full of drunk drivers. I clicked the email. Hi Mara, thanks for your patience regarding the compensation adjustment request. You've reviewed your performance metrics, which remain stellar. However, due to current reallocation of Q3 liquidity into strategic acquisition channels, your raise got lost in legal. We simply don't have the approval code to push it through this cycle. Let's revisit next quarter. Best Tyler HR business partner, lost in legal. I stared at the phrase. It was cute. It was ironic. It was a lie so lazy it was almost insulting. I am legal, or at least, I am the backbone of it. The general counsel, a man named Greg who spends 80% of his time golfing and the other 20% asking me how to convert PDFs to Word, wouldn't know a budget approval code if it bit him on his Callaway polo. This was the third year in a row. 3 years ago, it was pandemic uncertainty. 2 years ago, it was market volatility. Now, it was lost in legal. Meanwhile, I knew for a fact that Tyler and HR had just approved a $15,000 retention bonus for a junior developer who had broken the build server twice last month. I knew this because I processed the NDA paperwork for the bonuses. Quick side note, if you're listening this and you've ever been told your raise is in the pipeline while watching the CEO buy a new boat, do me a favor and hit subscribe and maybe upvote this story. It fuels our soul and helps us afford the good wine we're going to need to get through this retelling. Thanks. I didn't scream. I didn't type a furious reply in all caps. I didn't go to the break room and steal the good creamer. I am a professional. I simply took off my glasses, cleaned them with a microfiber cloth, and felt a very specific, cold switch flip in the back of my brain. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger, really. It was clarity. I thought I was furniture. A sturdy, reliable, ergonomic chair that you sit on and forget. They assumed that because I was quiet, because I didn't play ping pong, because I didn't wear Patagonia vests and shout, "Let's go," when I closed a ticket that I had no leverage. They were wrong. I looked at the sales team again. They were celebrating the Vanguard account. It was the crown jewel. An $80 million joint venture with a massive defense logistics firm. It was the deal that was going to make Zephyr Stream a unicorn. It was the deal that paid for the CEO's new glass-walled office. It was also a deal that I had written. Not the glossy pitch deck, not the handshake. I wrote the contract. The Master Service Agreement, MSA, the IP indemnity schedule, the 60-page addendum on royalty structures. I remembered that addendum vividly. I wrote it 3 years ago, late at night, when the company was desperate and cash poor. It needed Vanguard to sign, but we couldn't offer them the upfront equity they wanted. So I had crafted a performance-based royalty trigger. It was complex. It was buried in legalese that made your eyes bleed if you didn't know what you were looking for. I stood up. My knees popped slightly, a reminder that I wasn't 25 anymore. I walked past the ping-pong table. "Hey Mara, smile," one of the account executives yelled, banking a shot off the wall. "It's Friday." I gave him a thin, tight smile. "Have a great weekend, Braden." I walked to the secure file room. Most things were digital now, but the original Vanguard contract with the wet signatures was kept in the fireproof safe. I had the code. Of course I had the code. I was the only one who ever went in there. The room smelled of ozone and dust. I spun the dial on the heavy steel cabinet. Click, click, clack. I pulled out the binder. It was 3 inches thick, navy blue. Labeled Vanguard Licensing Agreement Executed Copy. I opened it to page 42. Clause 14C. I ran my finger over the text. The font was Times New Roman, size 10. Small, unassuming, deadly. In the event that the licensor, Zephyr Stream, achieves 3 consecutive quarters of 99.99% uptime while processing in excess of 5 terabytes of client data, the milestones, licensor acknowledges that intellectual property rights for the core algorithm shall shift to a shared royalty model, entitling the original IP architect to a retroactive commission of 0.5% of gross contract value, unless a waiver is signed by said architect. I checked the signature page. Signed by the CEO of Vanguard. Signed by our CEO. And on the bottom line, IP architect/drafting analyst. Signed, Mara L. Reyes. I closed the binder. The silence in the file room was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It was full of potential energy. Lost in legal, I whispered to the empty room. The irony was delicious. My raise wasn't lost. It was right here, hiding in plain sight, compounding interest for 3 years. I wasn't going to reply to Tyler. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to teach them a lesson about the importance of reading the fine print. I slipped the binder into my tote bag. Technically, taking original documents is a violation of company policy. But then again, so is wage theft. And I had a feeling that by Monday morning, company policy wasn't going to matter much anymore. I spent the weekend in my home office, which is the exact opposite of Zephyrstream's headquarters. It's quiet, it's organized. There's no ping-pong table, only a very efficient espresso machine and a cat named Certarari who judges me from a sunbeam. I had the contract, now I needed the data. Clause 14C was a dormant trigger. It relied on performance metrics. If the company sucked, the clause meant nothing. If the company did well, exceptionally well, the clause woke up and demanded to be fed. I logged into the admin dashboard. My access level is God mode. Not because I'm a hacker, but because 5 years ago, the CTO got tired of manually approving my requests for audit logs and just gave me root access to the data warehouse. He probably forgot he did it. People forget a lot of things about me. I pulled the uptime reports for the last 24 months. Q1 2023, 99.992% uptime. Q2 2023, 99.995% uptime. Q3 2023, 99.998% uptime. There it was. The first milestone, 3 consecutive quarters of near perfection. I remembered those months. The engineering team had slept under their desks. I had personally ordered 70 pizzas for late-night coding sessions. The CEO had bought himself a Porsche to celebrate the team's resilience. I had received a $50 Starbucks gift card. Next, the data volume. Client data processed, 12 terabytes. 15 terabytes, 22 terabytes, way over the 5 TB threshold. I sat back, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in my glasses. The math was simple, but the implications were staggering. 0.5% of the gross contract value. The Vanguard deal was valued at $80 million over 5 years. That's $400,000. Plus retroactive penalties for failure to notify. Plus interest, we were looking at $500,000. Minimum. But it wasn't just the money, it was the structure. I had written Clause 14C as a poison pill to protect the company from a hostile takeover back when we were a startup. It was designed to make the IP expensive if someone tried to steal it. But in their arrogance, the current executive team, most of whom were hired after I wrote the contract, had never bothered to reread the legacy agreements. They treated the Vanguard deal like a cash cow, milking it dry, oblivious to the fact that the fence around the pasture was electrified. I printed every log. I printed the quarterly reports where the CEO bragged about these exact numbers to the board. I printed the email from the CTO confirming flawless execution of Vanguard protocols. I was building a fortress of paper. Sunday night, I sat on my patio with a glass of Cabernet. I watched the California sunset bleed purple and orange over the hills. I thought about Tyler in HR. I thought about his lost in legal email. He had tried to save the company maybe $10,000 a year by denying my raise. In doing so, he had forced me to audit my own worth. I took out my phone. I didn't call a lawyer, not yet. I called the one person who would appreciate the irony of the situation as much as I did. I called the enemy. Well, enemy is a strong word. In the world of high-stakes contracts, opposing counsel isn't your enemy, they are your sparring partner. If you're good, there's a mutual respect. I dialed the number for Robert Vance. He was the general counsel for Vanguard, a shark in a bespoke suit, a man who had negotiated treaties for defense contractors. He scared the living daylights out of our CEO. He answered on the second ring. Mara, his voice was gravel and expensive scotch. Sunday, either the servers are down or you're quitting. Neither, Robert, I said, swirling my wine. I'm doing some housekeeping. I was reviewing the MSA we executed 3 years ago, specifically the royalty addendum. There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy silence. I could hear him shifting in his leather chair. Clause 14C, he asked. He knew, of course he knew. He was a good lawyer. He had probably flagged it years ago, laughed at how dangerous it was for us, and signed it because it didn't hurt Vanguard. In fact, if we defaulted on paying the IP architect, me, it technically put Zephyrstream in breach of the vendor compliance standards. Clause 14C, I confirmed. It seems my company has overlooked the notification requirements. The milestones were met 18 months ago and they haven't paid you, Robert asked. His voice dropped an octave. It wasn't pity, it was predatory interest, not a dime. In fact, it just denied my cost of living adjustment. Robert laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. Mara, that is extremely negligent of them. If they are in breach of the payment terms to the IP architect, that compromises the indemnity shield for the entire software suite. Technically, Zephyrstream is operating our systems without a valid license right now. Technically, I agreed. I thought you might want to know, before I file anything. I appreciate the heads up, Robert said. Lunch tomorrow? The place on 3rd with the terrible lighting? See you at noon, Robert. I hung up. My hand wasn't shaking. I felt a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was a liability. And come Monday, I was going to be the most expensive problem they had ever ignored. The restaurant was called El Amber. It was dark, expensive, and served steaks the size of hubcaps. It was the kind of place where deals were made in whispers, and the waiters knew to never interrupt a silence. Robert was already there, a martini sitting untouched in front of him. He looked like a silver-haired wolf in a Brioni suit. He didn't stand up when I arrived, he just nodded at the empty chair. Mara, you look like someone who knows where the bodies are buried. I dug the graves, Robert. Of course I know where they are. I sat down and placed my napkin on my lap. Sparkling water, please, I told the waiter who materialized out of the gloom. Robert cut to the chase before the water even arrived. I had my team review the contract this morning. You're right. Clause 14C is ironclad. It's actually brilliant. Who let you put that in there? The old CEO. He was desperate to close the deal. He told me to add whatever safeguards necessary to protect the IP value. He thought it protected the company from you. He didn't realize it protected the IP creator from the company. Robert smirked. And the current regime? Greg, the golf pro masquerading as a general counsel? Greg thinks force majeure is a French dessert. Robert chuckled, but his eyes were cold. He tapped a manicured finger on the table. Here's the situation from my side, Mara. Vanguard pays ZephyrStream $20 million a year. We rely on your software. If ZephyrStream is in breach of its own internal IP compensation protocols, that creates a liability chain. If you sue them and win an injunction, you could theoretically freeze the code. I could, I said softly, but I don't want to hurt the product. I built the product structure. I just want what the contract says is mine. And you want them to bleed a little, Robert added. I took a sip of the sparkling water. I want them to understand that lost in legal is not a valid accounting strategy. Robert pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the white tablecloth. It was thin, precise. This isn't legal advice, he said, the standard lawyer disclaimer. But Vanguard takes compliance very seriously. If we were to discover that a key vendor was failing to compensate its primary IP architect, we would be forced to issue a formal notice of inquiry. It would demand an audit of all IP-related disbursements to ensure the software we are using is free of encumbrances. I opened the folder. It was a draft letter, addressed to the CEO of ZephyrStream. Urgent audit of intellectual property compliance and royalties. It demanded proof that Clause 14C had been satisfied. It cited the exact milestones I had printed out. It requested a response within 48 hours. If you send this, I said, looking up. Greg will panic, the CEO will scream. Good, Robert said. They've been overcharging us for support hours for 6 months. I've been looking for a reason to squeeze them. You just handed me a vice grip. He leaned in. You realize, Mara, that once I send this, there is no going back. They will hunt for the leak. They will know it's you. They won't know I corrected him. They'll suspect. But they can't prove I spoke to you. And even if they do, retaliation against an employee for asserting contractual rights regarding their own compensation. In California, treble damages, Robert whispered, savoring the legal term like a fine wine. Exactly. Do it, I said. Robert signaled for the check. I'll send it tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock a.m. I suggest you be in the office. The fireworks should be spectacular. We didn't shake hands. We didn't need to. We were two professionals who understood the mechanics of the machine. I walked out of the restaurant into the blinding California sun. I felt lighter. I went back to the office for the afternoon. I sat at my desk. I answered emails. I helped a junior associate fix a formatting error in NDA. I was helpful. I was pleasant. I watched Tyler from HR walk past my desk. He was holding a green smoothie and wearing noise-canceling headphones. He didn't even look at me. Enjoy the smoothie, Tyler, I thought. Might be the last thing you digest comfortably for a while. Tuesday morning, 9:02 a.m. The office was buzzing with the usual caffeine-fueled chaos. The marketing team was arguing about font sizes. The sales team was ringing a literal cowbell because someone had sold a $500 subscription. Then the email hit. I didn't receive it directly. It went to the CEO, Brett, the CFO, Chad, and the general counsel, Greg. I sat quietly, monitoring the network traffic headers. I saw the email from Vanguard Legal enter the server. It was flagged high importance. At 9:15 a.m., I saw Brett forward it to Greg. Subject, FWD, urgent audit. Greg, handle this. Probably just standard compliance spam. Don't let them slow down the Q4 pipeline. At 9:30 a.m., I saw Greg forward it to the VP of Finance. Subject, FWD, urgent audit. Chad. They're asking about royalty structures. Do we have any of those? Just send them some generic financials. At 9:45 a.m., the email landed in my inbox. From Greg, General Counsel, to Mara Ray's subject. Vanguard whining again, Mara. Vanguard sent some formal nonsense about an IP audit in Clause 14C. Sounds like legacy contract gibberish. Can you draft a standard we are in full compliance response? Don't spend too much time on it. I need you to focus on the merger due diligence. THXG, I stared at the screen. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. They hadn't even read it. They hadn't opened the attachment where Robert had explicitly listed the milestones. They saw Clause 14C, didn't know what it was, and blindly forwarded it to the one person in the company who knew exactly what it was. They were asking the arsonist to investigate the smell of smoke. I opened the email. I hit reply. Hi Greg, I'll log this in the compliance tracker. I need to pull the original files to verify the specific language of Clause 14C. It might take a few days to cross-reference with the performance logs. I'll keep you posted. Best, Mara, sure thing. Take your time, Greg replied instantly. Take my time. I wasn't going to take my time. I was going to let the clock run out. The Vanguard letter demanded a response within 48 hours. That meant Thursday morning. If we missed the deadline, Vanguard reserved the right to suspend payments pending investigation. I created a new digital folder on my encrypted drive. I named it Contingency Escalation. Into this folder, I dragged 1. The original email from HR denying my raise. 2. Email from Greg asking me to handle the audit regarding my own unpaid royalties. 3. A PDF export of the Slack conversation where Chad, CFO, joked about hiding profits to avoid paying out bonuses last year. I archive everything. Never annoy the person who manages the data retention policy. Wednesday passed in a blur of surreal normalcy. I sat in meetings where Brett talked about radical transparency and valuing our people. I watched him present a slide deck about our record-breaking uptime. We are unstoppable. Brett cheered, fist pumping. Vanguard is thrilled with our performance. They are thrilled with the performance, I thought. They are less thrilled that you're stealing from the architect of that performance. I looked at Greg during the meeting. He was scrolling through Instagram on his phone under the table. He had completely forgotten about the Vanguard email. To him, it was just another task he had delegated to the help. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. For years, I had resented being invisible. I hated being the woman in the gray cardigan who fixed the formatting while the men invests took the credit. But now, invisibility was a superpower. I was a ghost in the machine. I was walking through walls, planting dynamite, and they were handing me the matches. Thursday arrived. The 48-hour deadline was approaching. I didn't send the response. I didn't draft the "We are in compliance" letter. Instead, I updated the ticket in our internal system. Status, pending legal review, awaiting executive sign-off. Technically, I was waiting. I was waiting for them to do their jobs. I was waiting for them to realize that the cliff edge was right there. They didn't. At 5:00 p.m. on Thursday, the deadline passed. At 5:01 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Robert. Radio silence. Old move, I replied. They think it's spam. They delegated it to me. I'm reviewing. Robert replied with a single emoji. Popcorn, the trap was set. Now we just had to wait for the snap. Friday morning, the audit committee meeting. This was usually a borefest where Chad, the CFO, tried to explain why we were burning cash faster than a bonfire in a wind tunnel. Today, however, the atmosphere was different. There was a weird energy. We gathered in the Disrupt conference room. Glass walls, uncomfortable avant-garde chairs, a $20,000 espresso machine humming in the corner. Chad stood at the head of the table. He was 35, wore a vest that cost more than my car, and had the confidence of a man who had never been told no in his life. "Okay, team," Chad said, clapping his hands. "Vanguard payments are looking weird this month. Accounts receivable says the wire is pending. Anyone know why?" My heart did a slow, heavy thud. Vanguard had frozen the payment. Robert moved fast, probably just a bank holiday in. "Wherever they bank," Greg said, spinning a pen. "I'll ping them." "Do that," Chad said. "We need that cash flow for the Q4 offsite in Tahoe." Then a voice spoke up from the end of the table. Actually, it was Kevin. Kevin was a 22-year-old junior analyst, fresh out of Stanford. Smart. Too smart. I was looking at the liability ledger yesterday. I saw a flag on the contingent liabilities tab. Something about royalty class B. It's accruing at like 0.5% of gross. The room went quiet. Chad frowned. "Royalty? We don't pay royalties. We're a SaaS platform, not a record label. It's in the legacy code base," Kevin persisted, tapping his laptop. "Clause 14C? It says it triggers upon uptime milestones. The system automatically flagged it as a liability because our uptime is so high." Chad looked at Greg. "Greg, what the hell is Kevin talking about?" Greg looked blank. "I don't know. Probably some old boilerplate the previous lawyers left in. Ignore it." "I can't just ignore a flagged liability, Greg," Kevin said, his voice shaking slightly. "If the auditors see this..." "Kevin," Chad snapped. "We are not paying royalties. Delete the flag. Reclassify it as system error." I watched Kevin. He looked uncomfortable. He looked at his screen. And he looked up and locked eyes with me. He knew I handled contracts. I held his gaze. I didn't shake my head. I didn't nod. I just stared at him with a neutral, intense expression that said, "Don't be a hero, kid." Kevin looked back at Chad. "But if the contract says..." "Delete the flag, Kevin," Chad barked. "God, why does everyone in this company want to find problems? We are trying to scale. Reclassify it and let's move on." Kevin slumped. "Okay." Classifying as error. He typed the command. The red flag on the screen disappeared. They had just committed financial fraud, willful suppression of a known liability in front of witnesses. I quietly opened my notebook and wrote down the time, 10:14 a.m. Chad orders deletion of clause 14C liability flag. Kevin complies under duress. "Mara," Chad turned to me suddenly. "You track the IP stuff. We don't owe anyone royalties, right?" This was the moment. I could lie and protect myself for now, but implicate myself later. Or I could tell the truth in a way they wouldn't hear. "The contract language is very specific, Chad," I said, my voice steady. "Clause 14C exists. It was signed by the previous executive team. Whether or not you choose to acknowledge the liability is an accounting decision, not a contractual one." "See," Chad said, turning back to the room. "It's legacy junk. An accounting decision. And I've decided it's zero." Moving on, he heard what he wanted to hear. He heard "you can decide." He didn't hear "you are breaking the law." I looked down at my notebook. My hand was trembling slightly now, not from fear, from adrenaline. After the meeting, I received a Slack message from Kevin. Kevin, hey Mara, that clause? It had your initials on the draft log. You wrote it, didn't you? I hesitated. Kevin was a good kid. I didn't want him to go down with the ship. Mara, Kevin, if I were you, I would send an email to Chad confirming his instruction to delete that flag. BCC your personal email, just for your records. Kevin, is it that bad? Mara, do it now. I saw the Kevin is typing, bubble for a long time, then it stopped. 10 minutes later, I got a BCC on an email from Kevin to Chad. Subject, confirmation of instruction to reclassify royalty flag. Chad, per our meeting. I have removed the liability flag as instructed. Smart kid. He just bought himself a life raft. As for Chad and Greg, they had just drilled a hole in the hull of the Titanic to let the water out. The weekend felt like holding your breath underwater. Vanguard had frozen the payment on Friday afternoon. Usually this would trigger alarms immediately. But Chad, in his infinite wisdom, had left early for a networking retreat in Napa. Accounts receivable team saw the error, emailed Chad, got his out-of-office auto-reply, and decided it was a problem for Monday. Perfect storm. I spent Saturday morning with my personal attorney, a sharp, terrifying woman named Alina who operated out of a strip mall office next to a Thai massage parlor. Don't let the location fool you. Alina ate corporate lawyers for breakfast. I laid it all out, the binder, the emails, the lost in legal rejection, timeline of the ignored Vanguard notices, the notes from the finance meeting where Chad ordered the fraud. Alina read through everything, her face unmoving. She flipped through the pages with a rhythmic snap, snap, snap. Finally, she looked up over her glasses. They are incredibly stupid, she said. They're arrogant, I corrected. They think rules are for other people. Well, Alina smiled, revealing very white, very sharp teeth. Rules are about to become very expensive for them. Here is the strategy. Vanguard sues for breach. Zephyr Stream will panic. They will try to fire you for negligence in not warning them. That's when we drop the whistleblower suit. Retaliation, wage theft, and since they ordered the deletion of the financial flag, Sarbanes-Oxley violations. I don't want to destroy the company, Alina, I said. I just want my royalties, and I want them to admit they were wrong. Mara, she said gently, you don't get one without the other. They're a cancer, you have to cut it out. She drafted a letter of representation. To Zephyr Stream Legal Department. Rights and claims of Mara L. Raise regarding intellectual property royalties. Do not send this yet, Alina instructed. Wait until Vanguard drops the hammer. Then, 10 minutes later, you send this to HR. It freezes them. They can't fire you while you have an active legal claim regarding the very issue they are being sued over. Makes you untouchable. I went home. I cleaned my apartment. I scrubbed the grout in the shower. I needed to do something with my hands. Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my living room, staring at the dark screen of my TV. I thought about the last 5 years, the late nights, the weekends I worked for free because we're a family, the time I missed my niece's baptism because the server crashed and I had to review the emergency vendor contracts. I had given them everything, and they couldn't even give me a cost of living raise. Your raise got lost in legal, I whispered to the dark. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about dignity. It was about the fact that they looked at me and saw nothing. Well, tomorrow they were going to look at me and see God. I opened my planner to Monday's date. I wrote a single word, subpoena. I laid out my outfit for the next day, a black blazer, sharp, severe. I funeral for your career suit. I checked my email one last time. Nothing from Chad, nothing from Greg. They were sleeping soundly, dreaming of bonuses in Tahoe. I turned off the light. Sleep tight, boys, I said. Winter is coming. Monday, 8:45 a.m., the all-hands meeting. This was a monthly ritual where Brett stood on a stage, yes, we had a stage in the break room, and told us how we were changing the world. The room was packed. People holding coffees. Looking tired. Brett was up there wearing a t-shirt that said disrupt under a $2,000 blazer. This quarter is looking incredible. Brett shouted into the microphone. Vanguard is expanding. We are looking at a 20% growth trajectory. I stood in the back, leaning against the wall near the exit. I checked my watch. 8:52 a.m. The double doors at the back of the room opened. It wasn't a late employee. 2 men in dark suits walked in. They weren't wearing tech casual. They were wearing federal court formal. Behind them walked Robert Vance. The room quieted down. Ripples of confusion spread from the back to the front. Brett stopped talking mid-sentence. Can I help you, gentlemen? Brett asked, squinting against the stage lights. Robert walked straight to the stage. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at Brett. Brett Sterling? Robert asked. His voice didn't need a microphone. It carried. Yeah, who are you? One of the men in suits stepped forward and handed Brett a thick stack of papers bound with a heavy clip. You are being served, the man said. Civil lawsuit for breach of contract, intellectual property theft, and willful noncompliance. Plaintiff, Vanguard Defense Logistics. The room went dead silent. You could hear the espresso machine hissing in the distance. What is this? Brett laughed nervously. Is this a prank? Chad? Greg? Greg pushed his way to the front. Robert. What the hell is this? We have a meeting scheduled for. We had a deadline. Robert cut him off. It expired Thursday. You failed to respond to a formal notice of audit. Per Clause 14C in Section 9 of the MSA, Vanguard is immediately terminating the service agreement for cause and seeking damages for unauthorized use of unlicensed IP. Terminating? Brett's face went the color of Elmer's glue. You can't terminate. That's an $80 million contract. Correct. It was an $80 million contract, Robert corrected. Now it is a lawsuit for $120 million, including treble damages for the fraud detected during our preliminary review. Fraud? Chad squeaked from the side of the stage. We have reason to believe you suppressed known liabilities regarding the IP architect's royalties, Robert said, his eyes scanning the room. He found me. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just adjusted my glasses. Robert looked back at Brett. Your license to use the software is revoked effective immediately. Unless, of course, you can prove you have settled the outstanding debts to the IP owner. Brett looked at the papers in his hand. He flipped them open. IP owner, we own the IP. Read page 42, Brett, Robert said coldly. Clause 14C, you don't own it until you pay the royalty, and you haven't paid. Greg grabbed the papers from Brett. He scanned the page. I saw the moment it hit him. I saw his hands start to shake. The paper rattled audibly. The raise, Greg whispered, the cost of living adjustment. He looked up. He looked at the back of the room. He looked at me. Every head in the room turned. 200 people followed Greg's gaze to where I was standing by the exit. I didn't shrink. I didn't look down. I walked forward. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. I walked right up to the stage. Mara, Brett asked, his voice trembling. What is going on? I think I said, my voice calm and clear, that my raise just got found illegal. I pulled an envelope from my blazer pocket. Alina's letter, representation and whistleblower protection. I handed it to Greg. I believe this belongs to you, I said. Then I turned to Robert. Shall we go to a conference room? It seems we have some negotiating to do. Robert smiled, a shark smelling blood in the water. After you, Miss Reyes. Walked out of the break room together. Behind us, the silence shattered into absolute chaos. 10 minutes later, we were in the boardroom. On one side, me and Robert. On the other side, Brett CEO, Chad CFO, and Greg GC. In the middle, the thick stack of lawsuit papers and a very heavy silence. Brett looked like he was going to vomit. Mara, look, we can fix this. We can. We can unlock that raise. Retroactive. 5%, 10%, I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. Brett, we are way past 10%. We are talking about clause 14C. Do you know what that is? It's some bullshit loophole you hid in the contract. Chad yelled. He was sweating. It's sabotage. It's a standard protection clause, Robert interjected smoothly. One that your company signed, and your company triggered by hitting the milestones, and your company ignored when notified. We didn't know, Greg pleaded. Mara didn't tell us. I sent you an email on Tuesday, I said quietly. Subject, Vanguard whining again. You told me to handle it. You told me to prioritize the merger due diligence. You didn't read it, Greg. Greg opened his mouth, then closed it. He knew I had the email. He knew I had the logs. Here is the reality, Robert said, leaning forward. Zephyr Stream owes Miss Reyes approximately $450,000 in back royalties, plus interest. Furthermore, because you instructed your staff to delete the financial liability flag, yes, we know about that, you are looking at personal liability for the officers involved. Chad went pale. Kevin, he whispered. Kevin is a good kid, I said. Leave him out of this, so what do you want? Brett asked. He sounded defeated. You want the money? Fine, we'll pay the $450,000. Just make the lawsuit go away. We can't lose Vanguard. It kills the company. It's not just the money, I said. It's the structure. You proved you can't be trusted with the IP. You tried to defraud the creator of the system. I slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a term sheet I had drafted with Alina over the weekend. 1. Immediate payment of all back royalties, $482,000 with interest. 2. A formal apology issued to the company for administrative errors regarding compensation. 3. Reinstatement of the royalty clause with a penalty multiplier for future delays. 4. My legal fees paid in full. Brett looked at the paper. This is a lot of money, Mara. It's cheaper than losing an $80 million client, Robert pointed out. Vanguard will only agree to drop the breach of contract suit if Miss Reyes signs a waiver stating she has been satisfied. If she doesn't sign, we walk. Today. Brett looked at Chad. Chad looked at the floor. Greg was rubbing his temples like he was trying to push his brain back inside his skull. And one more thing, I added. They all looked up. I want a promotion, I said, Director of Contract Compliance. Reporting directly to the board, not to the legal department. I don't trust Greg to read my emails anymore. Greg flinched. And I continued, I want full autonomy to audit all executive expenses for compliance with vendor contracts. Chad's eyes widened. He knew what was in those expense reports. The client dinners that were actually bachelor parties. The travel that was just Napa. You can't do that, Chad hissed. Then Robert files the lawsuit, I said simply. And the discovery process will find all those receipts anyway. Your choice, Chad, an internal audit by me or a federal audit by the court? The room was silent for a long minute. The air conditioner hummed. Brett slumped in his chair. He looked at me, really looked at me. The first time in 5 years. He didn't see the quiet woman in the cardigan anymore. He saw the person who held his life in her hands. Fine, Brett whispered. Done, we'll sign. Excellent, Robert said, clicking his pen. I have the settlement agreement right here. I watched them sign. Brett's hand was heavy. Chad looked like he was signing his own death warrant. Greg just looked tired. When they were done, I took the document. Thank you, I said. Now, if you'll excuse me. I have some work to do. Apparently, there was a compliance issue that got lost in legal. I need to go fix it. The wire transfer hit my account on Wednesday. $482,340.12. I stared at the number on my banking app. It looked like a phone number. It looked like freedom. But the money was just the beginning. The real payment was the fear. The following week, the changes started. Brett announced he was stepping back from day-to-day operations to focus on visionary strategy. Translation: the board heard about the near miss with Vanguard and put him in a timeout. Chad, the CFO, decided to pursue other opportunities. He was escorted out of the building on a Tuesday. I watched from my office window as he carried a box of personal items to his Porsche. He didn't look back. Rumor was that my first audit of his expenses turned up some very interesting invoices for consulting fees paid to his brother-in-law. Greg remained, but he was a ghost. He sat in his office, door closed, actually reading contracts now. Every time he saw me in the hallway, he nodded respectfully and scurried away. As for me, I got the corner office, the one with the view of the bay. I replaced the Hustle Harder neon sign with a nice, tasteful abstract painting. My title is now Director of Strategic Compliance and IP Governance. I hired Kevin. He's my senior analyst now. We have a strict policy. We read everything. We flag everything. And we never, ever ignore a red cell in the spreadsheet. The culture of the office changed, too. The ping-pong table was moved to the basement. The sales bros learned to knock before entering my office. I learned that Mara needs to sign off on this meant you better have your paperwork in order or God help you. Vanguard stayed. Robert and I have lunch once a month. We don't talk about business much. We talk about wine and travel and the stupidity of people who think they can outsmart the fine print. One afternoon, about 6 months later, I got an email from Tyler in HR. Subject: Annual Review/Compensation Adjustment. Hi Mara, just wanted to let you know that your new compensation package has been fully processed and approved by the board. No issues this time. Best, Tyler. I smiled. I took a sip of my tea, the expensive kind, imported from Japan, which I now expense to the company. I hit reply. Thanks, Tyler. Make sure you file it correctly this time. We wouldn't want it to get lost in legal again. I closed my laptop. The sun was setting over Silicon Valley, casting long shadows across the glass buildings. They say the devil is in the details. They're wrong. The devil is in the person who reads the details, and she just got a raise.